It is caught. Reggie Brooks. Reggie Brooks got it for a two-pointer, and Notre Dame is out in front, 17-16. Lost the ball. The pass is batted down. It's batted down by Carroll.
It's caught by Samaja. Inside the 20. Inside the 10. He's going in. Notre Dame has scored. Dawson throws. Open receiver in the end zone. Touchdown. Notre Dame. Somehow the Irish did it.
Out of the pack, 30, 35. Goodbye, baby. At the 50, the 40, the 30, the 20, the 10. 5-5 rocket touchdown. Irish.
Tyree. Whoa. Can he get there? Tyree at the 30, 20, 10. Touchdown, Notre Dame. Woo. 98. Big ones. Zibikowski looking for a block. Cuts to the right to the 40. Gets a block. Gets to the 45, 50. Up to the 45, 40, 30. One man to beat. 20, 15, 10. He's down to the 5. Touchdown, Irish.
What's up, Fighting Irish faithful? Welcome to the show, the podcast. This is volume 60. We've hit a milestone of 60 episodes on the internet. So, such a famous place. I am Joe. I am at Fighting Irish Faithful, at faithful_Irish on Twitter, fightingirishfaithful@gmail.com, all the other places. You know where to find us. Come on. If you're listening now, you've already found us. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for the Marshall pregame show, but we will also, of course, talk about the Ohio State game. I mean, how will we not go back and revisit? And then we will also talk about a third subject, which we will get to shortly. So I am joined with Red Snapper 9098 and multiple other people on Twitter Space. You can find us always on Twitter Space. We're aiming for 9 p.m. It ends up being like a really, really late Catholic Mass starting 5-10 minutes after, unless I screw up like I did tonight. So Red Snapper 9098 is my co-host in a fancy suit and tie, I think.
Yep, on my way home from work. So,
because you're a professional.
We'll got to bring a little bit of professionalism and class to this.
Well, and unlike me, who works from home 2 days a week, you are quote unquote in the office with the customer every working day.
This is true.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate all of you. If you want to subscribe, that's your thing. Cool. If not, this can be your dirty secret that you don't share with anyone. That's perfectly fine. Let's go straight to Jason Yeager before we get into anything else. Jason has requested to speak, and he's got a busy night and an early morning tomorrow of work. So, Jason Yeager, please unmute yourself, a friend of the podcast, and I know what your children like on their burgers for tailgates, not to sound creepy, but continue.
Get out of my windows, man. Thanks for letting me speak a little bit. Just excited to kind of see kind of where the offense goes after that Ohio State game. And I know, is Patterson playing? Does anybody know?
You know, I'll be the first to admit that I purposely have not listened to any other shows, have not read anything, because I do not want to, influence, quote unquote, tonight's show with respect to my reflections on the Ohio State game. I've done some analysis and breakdown, which we will, of course, stat dump, which someone like Kevin here will appreciate, or even Dave. Or the other nerdy people who like to remain silent. But anyway,
or those that don't,
Yeah. If you're pro stats, hey, get out there and wave the banner, right? Hey, respect. All are welcome. Here's Kevin. He wants to speak.
I'm all stats. I love the stats, so
that's
I
good.
enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's kind of something different from our show versus your average show. I mean, we are fans. I mean, look, I worked today, played with the baby. I changed multiple diapers. Whatever. Like, not to sound weird, but like, we're regular people. We are not professionals, quote unquote, like, but I do have access to Microsoft Excel and I'm pouring a scotch here. It's like, that is the extent of this show. So, we're very fan centric, but we try to bring some analytics, some data, and some things about math that we know from our professional and personal lives. Hey, we can apply it to the football team we like and that we like to complain about. And we can do it in a quote unquote constructive way.
I agree.
So Jason, you said you think the offense is going to have a jump back, kind of bounce back.
I want to see what they do as kind of how they bounce back from that, because that's what everybody's been talking about. The defense looked great, the offense not so much, but also got to give credit to Ohio State. They came in with a game plan and stuck to it and did well with it also. But I spoke a lot on the Ohio State stuff after the game, so I don't have a lot more to say about that. Everything kind of stayed the same. I did enjoy the LSU game, so I had to really wanted to put that out there.
Yes.
And Brian Kelly's press conference today, where he got called out by the reporter, which was even funnier. So,
I have yet to. Do you want to educate the host of the show?
That SEC broadcasting news crews, man,
they're savages.
They're savage. I love it.
Everybody was late. He came in and said, okay, we'll get this started. And all the media, he said all these media people were late and all that stuff. And one of the reporters just straight up said, if you would have won, might have been different.
Wow.
And he was just like, I don't think it has anything to do with us winning.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
yeah, I think...
welcome to the SEC country down there.
That's my opinion, too. Like, I think this is going to be a huge ego check for Kelly. And, look, we'll talk a little bit about this. I did a show in my first season. I think it was the 5th or 4th episode I ever did, and it was called Dissecting Brian Kelly's Last 10 Years. And it was in 2020, so it was 10 years of Brian Kelly as the head coach at Notre Dame. And he still did, 2 more seasons, the whole of 2020 and almost the whole of 2021. And for someone like Kevin or someone who's very stat focused, whatever, go back. It's in the archives. You can find it. And if not, DM me and I'll send you a link. It's fine. But I looked at BK relative to past coaches, relative to himself. It doesn't matter. And I said, look, this guy was not going to get it done. And I kind of did an entire mind dump of everything I had compiled about BK. And one of the things that came up was just his inability to win a big game on the road, neutral game, whatever. And what's interesting is this loss of LSU to Florida State is very indicative of kind of, look, you go to a big game, it's a big environment, the spotlight's on you, and you kind of just don't perform. And I don't want to talk too much about LSU, but what I will say, what was really surprising to me is Brian Kelly on the sideline of LSU. He was not like coaches always have the headset on, right? That's fine. But they're usually talking, or they got the play sheet covering their mouth, or, something like that. Right. But he was not, every time the camera was on him, he was just staring at what was happening on the field. He was not talking to one of his assistants. He wasn't coaching a player. He wasn't talking up to the tower. None of that shit was going on. He was just kind of just standing there. And the mic was actually lifted up and over by his eyebrow. And that was it. And I'm like, this is not a coach who's engaged with his team, engaged with his assistants. And then that was, my opinion was further cemented during a timeout where assistants and the trainers and all these people were in, giving water to the players, whatever. And it was near the end of the game, right before they got, down to the goal line there. And I paused the TV because I'm like, where's BK? Where's BK? And I was looking for him, right? Looking for the short, guy. And I saw him in the upper corner. He was arguing with a ref. He was not talking to any of his players. He was not talking to any of his assistants. Nothing. He was rather talking to a ref about whatever than engaging with his players. And to me, that was very indicative of like, look, who is this guy? And is LSU really going to be successful? You know, that's to be determined. But I'm like, it further reinforced the opinion I have about BK and saying we needed to get rid of this guy.
Totally agree.
So
that's
The whole of
That's
Twitter
exactly
did. I mean, I think the small little anecdote that we as Notre Dame fans got was the following evening watching Purple Face return. You know, seeing the mentality of just how LSU and all of the LSU tweets that were bashing, BK getting good talent. Well, that good talent didn't score until what, the third quarter? So
well, and the weirdest thing about all of this is like forget Brian Kelly for a minute. If you had come to me and said, "Hey, which program would you rather root for, LSU or Florida State?" I probably would say LSU just because of history and respect and some of these other things. And like Florida State, the chop and just you know, like, and don't get me wrong, like the chop is annoying. Honestly, it's probably the coolest chant in all of college football. I can't think of anything more annoying and whatever than that. Like, and in some weird, sick way, I have to kind of respect the chop. But this is probably the first time ever I've actively rooted and supported Florida State in a sense because I'm hate watching Brian Kelly. Not hate watching LSU, I'm hate watching Brian Kelly, and I want him to lose, and I want LSU and the SEC and quite frankly, everyone outside of the Notre Dame bubble to realize, look, this is the guy that was our head coach, but you know what? If you listen to an older Fighting Irish Faithful show, we were pretty critical of him, and we said, no, fuck this guy. In 2016, we should have fired him after the NC State game. That's my opinion. Go back to that episode, dissecting Brian Kelly's previous 10 years. You'll figure that shit out. So, well, anyway, Jason, Red Snapper, anything else to start up the show, or should we jump to our next person?
I'm waiting on, I think I said it to Craig on Facebook, but I think the short leash for Reese needed to start on Sunday, and when they got into film, and so I'm equally interested to see how, you know, the play calling, not just the offense, but just the overall play calling, everything, and I think that's going to be more indicative of how did Marcus Freeman hold his coaches, specifically Reese, and probably he stand a little bit on where the offense production lacked and where it could have improved, and throw his 2 cents in. So I'm curious to see how his impact with coaching up his coaches is. And I think that's the biggest bounce back that I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, that is something that's really interesting. And I've done, you know, my usual stat piece here on analyzing Marshall, our next opponent here at home, our first home game. You know, a 2:30 kickoff, right? The whole deal, right? Your typical beginning home game, right? This game reminds me a lot of Nevada from 2016, where you got kind of a I don't want to sound conceited or rude, but like it is a lower level program, right? You know, they're in the Sun Belt Conference now, right? They changed from Conference USA a few years ago, but Marshall is, they've popped up on the radar as, I think, playing above the rim relative to where they are within the context of all of college football. But the Thundering Herd is coming to South Bend, and I imagine there will be an adequate support of people wearing green for Marshall in the southeast corner of the stadium. And but yeah, it reminds me of Nevada from 2016, where, you know, Notre Dame had a big highlight, you know, marquee game on the road against Texas where we lost, and we lost in overtime, and it was like 50-55 or whatever the score was. And this game reminds me of that. It's like, hey, we're coming back home. All right, start the year off. All right, everything is back to normal, right? And that's kind of what this Marshall game reminds me of. So
Yeah, it's got almost the aura of a reset.
yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. You know, this is a reset. Like, look, you just played the biggest opponent on the schedule other than USC and Clemson, which other podcasts and other shows are already looking forward to Clemson. And personally, I'm like, and not to sound cliche of taking it one game at a time, but I'm just like, look, that's so far away. Like, that's like it's going to be Halloween when that game is going on. Like, look, I'm just trying to like hold on to summer and figure out, you know, how much longer the growing season is. And, you know, do I make one batch of hot pepper sauce or two, you know, for my garden? You know what I mean? Like I've got other things on the mind, you know, right now, rather than worrying about, you know, how many pumpkins to carve for Halloween. Okay. Enough of the analogies. I know you all get sick of that, but my point is, like, other shows are talking about that shit and already looking downstream at USC. Even other people are already talking about USC, and it's like, that is so far away from me right now. I want to focus on our team right now at the end of Ohio State, do some constructive criticism tonight. We want to talk to multiple people. We got Dave, we got Adam, we got Coach Parsegian, Adam Dowling. Jake was on. He dropped off. Sorry, Jake. You got impatient. ND Fanatics is on here. You know, we got a ton of people. We want to get to them. So let's jump to Jason. Jason, anything else you want to talk about? Either Marshall, LSU, or Ohio State?
No, I'm good. I appreciate it. Got my 2 cents in about Brian Kelly, and I'm just looking for. I think if we played USC or Clemson this weekend, I'd be worried about it, just from what we saw from the play calling and everything else. I want those games to get used. I want to build up to those for sure.
You're not wrong to have that suspicion in the back of your mind. And tonight we will further we'll throw some fertilizer, some nitrogen on that seed of doubt tonight.
Sounds good. And I'll definitely check out the YouTube whenever it posts up.
Hey, you do YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or one of these other random ones that Anchor puts out there. The Fighting Irish Faithful show is out there on as many platforms as we can possibly get to. Thank you, Jason, for joining us. We're going to jump to ND Fanatics, invite him to speak. He hasn't been on in a while. He's been invited to speak. If ND Fanatics wishes to jump on, go ahead and accept and hit the pink button if you so wish in the lower left-hand corner. Before we get to ND Fanatics, as we wait for him to jump on, I wanted to do two things because I was going back and listening to some older shows, and I realized that two of our traditions, we've already done some Brian Kelly bashing. That's our third tradition we do on this show, the Fighting Irish Faithful show. But there's two other things we do other than scotch and spreadsheets, which we're still drinking this Kirkland Island single malt scotch whiskey. I'm pretty sure we're going to finish it tonight, but usually it doesn't take, 8 episodes into a season to finish an entire, regular 750 milliliters. Wow. Damn metric system. That many, yeah. So that's where we're at. But the Twitter shout out tonight, I have to say this. It's going to go to the 5 Foot Nothing Pod and 5 Foot Nothing Pod, and anyone who has bought a custom jersey with your name and number supporting a under 12 whatever youth baseball team while simultaneously supporting your Fighting Irish. I have one. Red Snapper 1998 has one. JL Gallagher, Wookie. Who else has one? Red Snapper, help me.
Our father.
Our dad, our brother has one. Yeah, that's right. Ton ton of people have bought this jersey, and we're going to give a huge Twitter shout out to the 5 Foot Nothing pod. Please check him out. If you would like a fun custom Notre Dame, it's a baseball jersey, but it has Irish on the front. It's green. I have decided today that I will wear this to the green out. I am going to the Cal game. I will wear this for the green out, and underneath it will be a green Fighting Irish Faithful jerseys, or shirt, I should say. But I feel that this jersey pops. It's awesome. You can get it customized, and it's for a decent price. For reach out to 5 Foot Nothing pod and check his show out. He has a great show. He's a fan just like us. He works multiple, like a job or two. He's probably my second favorite podcast other than this one. Great guy. Check out Mike over at 5 Foot Nothing pod. So we got to give him a shout out. So
I love the metallicness in that green jersey. It really does pop.
Well, and I had it. I got it right before the summer here, and it was really fun to have when Notre Dame's baseball team was making a run at the College World Series. Now, it clearly didn't work out, and we were kind of the Cinderella team. But it was a lot of fun for us to beat a couple of the teams and wear the jersey. And I was on vacation at the time with extended family, and it was a good time. So. Well, anyway, let's jump over to ND Fanatics. ND Fanatics, we haven't had you on this show since probably the Oklahoma State game. Welcome back to the Fighting Irish Faithful show.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Hey, welcome back to the show. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I was going to say, guys, it's obviously bittersweet. If we would have said that Notre Dame holds Ohio State to 7 points at the half, we would all been ecstatic and thinking, it's great. They're probably going to win the game. But as we know, what the conclusion was, it was a continuation of the Oklahoma State game, unfortunately, where the first half and the second half did not replicate each other. They were complete juxtaposition as it relates to Notre Dame. One thing in terms of stats, that Ohio State team had 15 5-stars on it. Notre Dame had 4, I believe. 4. Total 4.
Wow.
The defense, by all accounts, as long as Ohio State does what they're supposed to do this year, they're favored by double digits in every game. Only Alabama has that same distinction this season. We have an elite, possible college football playoff caliber defense. I'd say we've had that possibly. Maybe in 2018, maybe in 2020, you could say more 2020. You held Alabama their lowest point total in 2 years. The 2018 Cotton Bowl ended poorly, but Aloy Gilman and Julian Love go out with 1:30 left or 2 minutes, and you have a 9-3 game turn into whatever it was at the half. It was ugly, 14 points in a minute. The offense has been the problem, though. 2018, 2020, and this second half of football. Granted, though, I will say Buckner didn't turn the ball over. He looked poised, more or less.
No team turned the ball over in this game.
Yeah, very much. And the one thing that I thought was going to be the game winner for us is that we had one guy that was supposed to be an All-American in Blake Fisher, Joe Wall, the guy that became an All-American in 8 games last year. I thought they were going to generate for the run game. We had that one drive with Audric Estime, but then it fizzled out, and he just couldn't protect. And the battle of defense and offense, which I thought was going to be, the main thing there, we achieved that, but we could not protect, and that was the difference in the game. There's no protection in the second half.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up some of this historical perspective, and thank you, ND Fanatics. You're bringing me back to the Oklahoma State game post game show where you are referring to stats. I have not seen. If anyone has rivaled me, and not that this is a competition, that's not what it's about. I'm the first to admit when I'm wrong or I don't know something. But ND Fanatics, I distinctly remember I've gone back and listened to the Oklahoma State post-game show, and you have come on and you provide some stats and some data and some information that, set me straight or educated me or just opened my eyes to something that I hadn't looked at before. And so I really appreciate that. I'm really glad you brought up some of the stats of the Oklahoma State game. And, some of the productivity we'll get into tonight later, but the overall opinion of the game is that Notre Dame was playing a team that had better talent. We talked about that. Notre Dame was 12th on average over 4 years. The Buckeyes were 6th on average over 4 years, right? So and you laid that out with the number of 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever you got there. Notre Dame, I think their offense played really well, and I want to give the toast of the tonight right now, and it's going to go to Tyler Buchner. And the reason for that is, we've had a few days here to digest the game. I've been able to go back to some probably copyright violated sources because I don't have DVR, but to rewatch the game on my phone and to see some of the initial parts of the game. And the initial play, one of our first plays on offense, is that long pass to Styles. It's a 54-yard pass from Buchner to Styles. If you do nothing else after this show, all right, obviously listen to the show and do what you want to do, but go back and watch that first pass. It was, number one, our longest pass of the game, but Buchner had literally half a second to throw the ball. If you look at the corner, the linebacker, outside linebacker who comes in, what happens is the defensive end or the guard gets double teamed by the offensive line. The running back blocks the safety the corner, and then the linebacker comes in with no one in front of him and just freight trains Buchner, and it results in a penalty too. But in that split second, Buchner is just man enough, has balls enough, and has the courage, athleticism, focus, whatever you want to describe it. Buchner has the ability to see Styles open in space because he sees that the the corner cheated up, and he throws in the ball, and Styles does his athleticism and gets down the field. But Buchner gets rocked on that first pass. And so that is why Buchner is the toast tonight. And I watched that play multiple times, and I'm like, how the fuck did this happen? What the fuck is wrong with our offensive line that this happened? And so that's why Buchner is the toast of the night. And that was the most impressive play I saw out of Buchner that I've ever seen.
For him to stand in there, absolutely, and deliver that shot was... He definitely took a hit for standing in there.
And I was just going to say, it is so refreshing after, kudos to Ian Book, living, I would say, so far above expectations. But as we all know, he had happy feet in terms of the pocket collapsing. Yep. He was not going to stand in the pocket and deliver. He was going to run, and he was going to run, and he was going to run, and he was going to run. And we know to win at an elite level, you need to stay in that pocket and deliver the ball downfield, because the ball is going to travel further than you can run against most of these elite defenses.
Well, and I think that says a lot about Buchner's, courage and athleticism to stay in the pocket. And maybe the play happened so fast that he had no other choice but to just like get rid of it and, hold on, and pray to Jesus. But the, if that plane was slowed down maybe a little bit, I imagine that Buchner maybe would have taken the sack and Book wouldn't. And that's not a criticism of Ian Book. That's just my opinion of one quarterback versus the other. I don't know.
To me, that answered right away was Buchner going to be able to, be a quarterback that does climb the pocket as needed and stick in there. And I think a lot of us had questions about his arm strength and everything else. And, we still kind of want to see those throws. And we did see some longer attempts as the game went on. But really, for him to have the determination and the fortitude to make that call of not have happy feet and to sit in there. I mean, he saw it coming the whole way. And let's do this. Like, he saw what he had to do. And then that right there kind of put my anxiety, if you will, of Buchner being the QB1 immediately to rest.
And I love how he delivers hits. He has no problem delivering a hit to a linebacker, and he doesn't shy away from it. Versus, that was another thing with Book, unfortunately,
Yes.
just due to his stature. If he would get hit, he would cough the ball up.
Absolutely. In that first drive that we scored a touchdown, I looked back and I was just beaming a shit-eating grin. And I'm watching Buckner lower his shoulder, and he drove back.
Three guys.
Well, I don't know if it's three, but it was definitely a linebacker-ish guy, and he drove him back. And Buckner initiated the hit. He said, I'm going to lower my shoulder. I'm going to get going. And eventually, in that drive, they handed off to Estime, who, by the way, #RTDB, Estime was we were under center in a fucking I formation. Estime gets the ball and jumps over the pile. That was I was so happy watching Estime take a ball from the I formation in a 3-point stance, jump over the pile on the 1 yard line. That is the shit you're supposed to do. None of this fucking shotgun. Get under center and hand it off to a fucking fullback, dive, jump over the pile, whatever. I was so happy seeing that, and he clearly got in. So sorry, I had to talk about that tonight. That was almost like the second toast. But the Buckner thing of having balls and throwing the pass, which was literally our longest pass on the whole game, which we'll talk about later. But that kind of shit is what we're looking for. A quarterback that has balls, takes a hit, another guy who is in an I formation, jumping over the pile. And Estime, had the most carries of the whole team as far as running backs, what have you. That was awesome. Let's jump over to Al.
Sorry.
No,
I was going to say on a final note with the Estime, I mean, I'm probably exaggerating here, but that reminded me so much of Jerome Bettis jumping over to Penn State in the snow game.
Yeah.
I was like, it's just so similar.
Yeah.
I was at the game, and I'm like, man, he is sky high.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, no problem, Andy Finex. You stay on as long as you want. Let's jump over to Adam Dowling. He's been very patient the last couple episodes to jump on. Adam, welcome to the Fighting Irish Faithful Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
My pleasure. Is this your first time joining us?
Oh, no, I've been on and off.
Welcome.
I've been on and off a little bit, but I've, no, definitely not the first time.
Okay. I've been drinking scotch, so.
You guys kind of stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry. We will happily
positive.
Backpedal and let you get on it. Hey, I'm sliding over a soapbox. You get on it. You do what you want.
Yeah, I want to be a little more positive just because, everyone's been talking about the receivers and the O-line for a couple days, which are issues, but just the positive of Buckner, I think. The way he looked so calm and so controlled of the offense the whole game, like you would have never guessed that was his first time playing an entire game. You'd never thought it. I just thought it was extremely positive.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Adam. Thank you. The fact that Buckner did not have that, deer in the headlights look, did not look like the environment overwhelmed him. He stayed composed. I said 2 shows ago in the Buck Wild show, I gave Tyler Buckner a ton of praise, saying that the body of evidence from his past, and I think that life, COVID, however you want to describe it, has kind of, gotten in the way of people seeing the true Tyler Buckner and the quarterback that I think can make Notre Dame successful over this year and into the future. I really appreciate you bringing up him and the contribution he made. And, did he throw multiple passing touchdowns? No. Did he have multiple rushing touchdowns? No. I think there's some other things going on that are preventing him from doing so. But at the same time, I think with what the hand he was dealt, he did the best he could.
Yeah, it kind of looked like they were kind of holding him back, where they didn't want him to make the big mistake. But his first start at Ohio Stadium in front of 106,000 people
Mm-hmm.
on that stage, and he looked like he'd been playing for 3 years.
Yeah, he did not at all look phased.
So I think that's a positive. I think our O-line's going to get better. Our receivers are going to get better. Offense sometimes takes a little bit of time, getting the rhythm down, especially with some new people. I think they're going to get better. So I'm just trying to stay positive with it.
Yeah, honestly, what else can we do as fans other than either be negative and critical, and don't get me wrong, there is a place for constructive criticism. I mean that's kind of what we do on this show, but at the same time, we're not going to be negative and just. We will not trash players. We will not throw players under the bus. We will, if we're going to throw any criticism, it's going to be at the administration, the coaches, those kind of guys. People in power that have the ability to influence change. The players are doing what the coaches said, right?
Yeah. And the one frustrating thing, to get a little bit on the negative side, but the frustrating thing is it was almost like a rewatch of the Georgia games to where our defense kept us in the game and we never can make enough plays. We don't have enough playmakers to win the game.
I think that's a very, very valid point.
I've sat in, I'm a season ticket holder, so I've sat in those stands, and the one thing, and this is on the positive side here, that I've sat there and said, we looked like we're not a very well-coached team. We made bad mistakes. We did it. Now, Saturday, I felt like we did not look like a bad coach team at all.
Yeah, I've kind of, after watching the game, and I've only been able to watch a replay of about the first half of the game. And if I'm wrong, by all means, someone criticize me, but I didn't think the play calling per se was bad. I thought it was more of an execution thing that was preventing Notre Dame from being successful, specifically on offense versus Ohio State. And I think it's look, our offensive line was very poor last year. I won't sugarcoat that. It was not good. And if we all of a sudden think just because we have Harry Hiestand back that, we're going to wave him with palm branches riding on an ass into Jerusalem here, that's not going to happen. Well, it wouldn't be Jerusalem, it would be South Bend. But you guys get my point. Harry Hiestand is great. He's a decent coach, but look, you have to coach up these guys, and, whatever mind diarrhea that you need to eradicate from them, okay, that might take time, but to then go into Ohio State in the horseshoe and to think that all of a sudden all those mistakes or some of that behavior or even just the talent, let's back up. Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, these guys, they're not on the team, right? I mean, we've got some decent players, right? We've got some good guys. Patterson's in there, but he's a little banged up, right? We have some decent guys, but we do not have the guys that are eating people's faces off in the NFL. That's going to happen this coming week or two, right? This is the kind of environment that Notre Dame is dealing with, and it will take time for us to get back to O-line U. I think we've kind of been on sabbatical, if I may use that example. But I really think that the deficiencies right now of the offensive line is what resulted in the loss at OSU. I'm convinced of that after watching some film, after going back and charting some plays and looking at what was successful, what was not. I really go back to the offensive line. So
yeah, to me, we looked young. We didn't look uncoached. We just looked young, like we made mistakes. We had
it's more like, I read that wrong, or I didn't pick up the right assignment, or and maybe it's on the coaching of not calling the right protection. Who knows? But first play of the game,
a few plays where they just total just busted assignments where they just let Ohio State just run free with Corral and Mugg a couple times.
Oh yeah.
No, absolutely. And there's no better coach than experience. And a lot of these guys have been moving around all fall, all summer. It's when we finally have assignments, set positions, communication, with the guy next to you, that's all experience. And as much as He-Stan can do, until they get in the experience and see their quarterback take a sack because they missed an assignment, until they have that, camaraderie with the guy next to them, that's just all attrition.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
It
Adam, thank you very
Nope.
much for joining us tonight. Unless there's anything else or final point you
one
wanted to
last
jump on.
thing. I just wanted to talk about. I briefly talked about the coaching, but had to go do another Brian Kelly thing. But watching that game, Brian Kelly.
This is the
remind
third
me-
tradition of this show, other than Scotch and
It
spreadsheets.
reminded
is Brian
me
Kelly
of
bashing.
It reminded me of sitting in the stands in section 25, row 7, turning to my wife and said, "We are just a bad coach team." And then looking at what Brian Kelly was doing, that's what it reminded me of. And then I think of what happened Saturday, and I did not think we were a bad coach team at all. I
Good.
think we made some mistakes, but I did not think we were a bad coach team.
Excellent. Well,
Thanks a lot, guys.
Adam, as a season ticket holder, I assume you will be at this Marshall game.
Yep. I'm about an hour drive, so
Good.
I'm like halfway in between Chicago and South Bend. So
Excellent.
yep, we go to every game.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well,
Maybe
Adam,
we'll see some of you guys in Vegas. How about that?
I was promoting the Vegas game all last season, and I wanted so bad to go, but with a wife and a little one at home, I could not justify it going to Vegas without them. So anyone who's going to Vegas, I'm really happy for you. I'm going to be living vicariously through you. So I expect everyone who's going to Vegas to be constantly, posting pictures and videos and of all your, I don't care if you're eating, a cheeseburger on the strip, tweet that shit, right? If you're at a craps table, or playing video poker, my two favorite things to do in a casino other than get quote unquote free drinks. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. So, or if you're on Fremont Street, I love Fremont Street, especially the Golden Nugget. The Golden Nugget is the Doc's favorite casino in all of Las Vegas. So
we'll definitely send some pics. We're actually celebrating my 40th birthday. So
oh my gosh! Woo! Oh, here we're gonna do a first here. We're gonna do a second toast here. Happy early birthday! Wow, to do that in Vegas, that's awesome. Woo! That's exciting.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Go Irish.
All right, go Irish. Thanks, Adam, for joining us. Let's jump over to Brandon Fry. Let's keep the season ticket holder streak going here. Coach Bar, CJ, and Kevin, I see you. JB, I see you. We'll get to you as soon as we can, but let's let Brandon jump on here real quick. He's been invited to speak if he so wishes. If not, no big deal. So sidebar. So the Marshall game is coming up this weekend, and we will talk about Marshall. We will not talk about Brian Kelly and Ohio State tonight. The Marshall game, I will personally be there. I'm going with some Knights of Columbus people and a friend of mine from college. And I will not be doing too much tailgating. We'll be kind of wandering around campus. I got some people that have never been to campus, so they got to see some of the sites. So DM me if we want to meet up. But we will be at the Cal game the following weekend with a full-on tailgate. Brandon, welcome back to the show.
How's it going tonight?
Brandon, thank you for joining us. How are you feeling about us going into this Marshall game after a loss to Ohio State?
I really hope it's a lot different than the Brian Kelly era, and we put up some points and definitely look like an impressive offensive team as well as defense, and not just score 30 to 40 points and then shut down the second half.
Yeah. Are you, Brandon, I don't know, if you've looked much into the press or what Marshall did last week against their opponent. Sidebar, not that this is a pop quiz, but it is a pop quiz. Do you know who Marshall played last week?
I heard it earlier on the local sports beat station, but
if you're really savvy, it was
Norfolk
a team
State?
It was Norfolk State, and surprisingly, and for me that kind of like rang a bell because in the year of COVID, that was the team that Gonzaga played in the first round of the tournament before they got their ass kicked by Baylor. If you want to hear more about that, go to an earlier episode where the doc and I spent way too much money to watch Gonzaga lose to Baylor. And if anyone's like, why are you talking about Gonzaga basketball? Well, it's because I went to Gonzaga. So go Zags. But we've been undefeated since World War II. So, okay, in football. But Brandon, so Marshall beat the shit out of Norfolk State. And should Notre Dame fans be concerned or maybe like cold showered a little bit with Marshall?
I honestly don't think so. I can definitely see the angle you're coming from because of the way they played last week, but I'd like to think we're a little bit different opponent than Norfolk State. But I hope we put up at least 60 points on them, to be honest, and hold them under 14 probably.
Well, I personally would be a huge fan of that. The to be a little realistic with people, I mean, granted, the beginning of the year, the stats are skewed, right? We have one game, and we played arguably one of the most competitive teams, probably a top 3 team, right? Between Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Notre Dame played Ohio State, clearly. Could you name any other team that's better than them? I personally couldn't.
No.
So that's who we played. Marshall, a team from the Sun Belt Conference, played a team I've hardly heard of, and I only heard of because I'm a Gonzaga basketball fan, right? Okay?
Yeah.
I've never heard of them. And if anyone can guess, let me put it this way. The first person who can guess their mascot without Googling it, right? Jump on here and we'll give you some praise. But Norfolk State is trash. Marshall is from a weak conference, and their 4-year recruiting average is 86th out of 129 teams. Okay, in Division I. So should we be concerned about Marshall? The answer is no, right? Especially for a coach, Charles Huff, who's this is his second season. Okay, Grant, he is technically a better win percentage than Coach Freeman, but let's not talk about that, right? Like, who's he played versus who Coach Freeman's played. All right, he had 3 weeks to prepare for a halfway decent Oklahoma State team, which I think finished 6th or 7th in Sagarin last year, right? So Oklahoma State was nothing to wipe your nose at. And Marshall, okay, yes, they're from West Virginia, and, there was a movie made about them, but here's the thing, all right? This is the cold shower part. I did my normal thing because I'm stubborn, and I looked at all the stats that I normally talk about, right? What is that? Scoring margin, total touchdowns, passing touchdowns, scoring defense, scoring offense, etc. All the way down the list. I look at the stats of Marshall versus the stats of Notre Dame. After one game, regardless of who they played, Notre Dame loses in almost every single category except red zone scoring. Every other stat, Notre Dame was worse than Marshall last week. Now, granted, their opponent, Marshall's opponent, was trash. Notre Dame's was very good. Their opponent and their talent was worse. Ours was better. So, am I surprised by the stats? No. But, and I'll throw it back to Brandon here. Where am I going with this? Marshall, we should not dismiss them as a trash can. They're not a bunch of tomato cans. They are a team that has a halfway decent coach who did, as an assistant, coach with Nick Saban at Alabama, as, a running back coach from 2019 to 2020. Okay. So he was with Saban for a couple years, right? So he knows some things. And what do we talk about this show? Hashtag RTDB. They put up a shit ton of rushing yards. Okay, their rushing attempts per touchdown last week was 12.8. That's better than national champion average of 15.97. They put up 380 fucking yards of offense. Right now, it's technically second in the country, and they put up over 600 fucking yards of offense. So should we freak out a little bit? Just a little bit. We'll freak out a little bit. Whereas Notre Dame only put up 253 total yards of offense last week. Okay, I'm getting angry. Back to Brandon. I don't do rants as well as John over at Always Irish. But I also don't have a video screen and sweet gear behind me. But Brandon, you don't sound worried at all about this Marshall game, do you?
No, I really don't. One of the things they were talking about on Sports Beat tonight was just common opponent last year, and they also played Navy as well as we did, and they actually beat Navy by more points than we did, which was a little surprising to me. But yeah, I guess Marshall's a decent opponent, but I don't know. I just really hope it's not like how when we played Toledo or Ball State in the past, and I think Freeman will have them a little more prepared than Kelly did in past years. So I'm really not too worried, to be honest. I forget what the point spread was, but I saw it earlier in the week, and I was definitely thinking of hammering the over for us. But I don't know. I think they'll definitely be hyped up for Freeman's first home game, and it's definitely not a sold-out crowd because I've been checking secondary markets and see so many tickets still available. So
I don't even think you have to go
to.
I don't even think you have to go to a secondary market. I think you can go to a primary market, i.e. UND.com. You know, this is like the only time we're gonna plug the Notre Dame ticket office here. But I think you can get Marshall tickets now. You know, so I don't know what that means, but yeah, I agree with you. I do believe still that Coach Freeman and the way our team came out, we talked about this in the Ohio State post-game show. We went live immediately after the game. Brandon, I know you were at the game, and we'll come back to that in a second. We went live immediately after the Ohio State game. We did a show, immediate fan reaction. I think I had like 2 lines of notes per the the box score of whatever the internet gave me, and we went live and we got a lot of people. So if anyone is listening on the podcast version, you want to go back, go to the Ohio State post game show. You'll get the immediate fan reaction, no filter, people expressing their opinion about the game. Now, Brandon, you were at this Ohio State game.
Yes, sir.
And so do you want to walk through the audience what you would like to share about that?
Well, the few, I'd say, month or 2 months before, I was definitely very nervous from the stories I kept hearing from various people across Twitter to Michigan fans that are local that have experienced Ohio State fans, and just how nasty everyone was saying their fans were. But we got there, and you had the occasional fuck Notre Dame and go home, stuff like that. But I was very surprised at how, not friendly, but they weren't nasty towards us. It was definitely a fairly good experience than compared to what I thought. I was hearing people pee on you inside the stadium. They'll throw a beer on you while you're walking down the street, and I didn't see any of that. So
no one threw a beer bottle at you?
Nope, no beer bottles.
Well, that's good. So it's great. Okay.
I've also been to the 2018 game at Clemson and then at Florida State last year. And hearing how Ohio State Stadium is just so massive and stuff, I was honestly disappointed in the environment a little bit. I'm guessing it's because of how we were basically winning most of the game, so they didn't have a lot to cheer about. Fourth quarter was a little more amped up, but compared to Clemson and Florida State, honestly, I would put it third behind both of those.
Interesting.
Just the environment and the loudness. Clemson was deafening the whole game, and I had a headache after that game.
Ooh.
And then Florida State was that was an energetic game, so their fans were in it the whole game. I'd say from like the second through almost the end of the third quarter, it was fairly quiet, and I had a few different people which I still haven't watched back the game on TV, but a few different people say they could hear the Irish fans on the TV broadcast, which was a little surprising.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because, like I said earlier in the show, I had the opportunity to rewatch the first half of the game, and you could hear the band. Well, I don't know if it was the Notre Dame band, but the band and Irish fans, and maybe it's ESPN with their strategic microphones. But the point is, on the broadcast, you could hear, Celtic chant and some of the other, Let's Go Irish type of stuff. And I think that was really interesting with respect to, being a loud stadium. And it was a little gratifying, anyone who's been on Twitter, obviously we're on Twitter Space tonight, but anyone who's been on Twitter where you've been basically taking, I don't want to say abuse, but a lot of criticism from Ohio State fans where they're talking trash. And Grant, they won the game, right? So I won't ever take anything away from them for a win. But, they thought they were going to win by 30, 50 points. And they did not win by that much, right? They didn't cover the spread. And not that I'm trying to rub soothing balm, Vicks vapor rub on my chest because of that. No, we lost the game. I don't care if we lost by 50 or we lost by 1, right? We lost, right? So they get the bragging rights. My point is those Ohio State fans were shitting their pants in the second half. They were like, oh, shit. We may not be, they were freaking out. And none of them will admit that. Only one of my friends, a former coworker, actually was like, damn, you guys looked really good, and you guys came out, and you guys looked like something worthy of reckoning. And yeah, he's the only person, because he's a legit dude. But these other assholes on Twitter who we've interacted with, Brandon, people you saw at the stadium, they were probably shell shocked.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that's a huge departure from the Brian Kelly era, where we just go into an opponent's stadium. Other than one game, the Oklahoma game in 2012, but other than that, no other stadium I can possibly think of. And if someone disagrees with me, please jump on. Where Brian Kelly and a Notre Dame team went into, under his regime, an opponent's stadium, a big game, a night game, a bowl game, doesn't matter, where we went in and showed up and we were the underdog and we said, hey, what's up? Whip it out, man. And here we are. Notre Dame did that. And I'm going to give a little, credit to Coach Freeman and all of our coaching staff. We'll get critical tonight of a few things here, which we'll jump on. But there's some good things to take from this. I don't want to say good things to take from a loss, but there's no really other way to describe it. Right, Brandon?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So, Brandon, you're going to be obviously at the Marshall game and at the Cal game?
I will not be at the Cal game. I'll be in Chicago for that game. I know, that's the only home game I'll be missing.
Are you meeting with your broker and, setting up retirement for your...
I wish it was that important.
No, you don't have to get into your personal life. But yeah, no, the Fighting Irish Faithful show will be represented next week against Marshall. Like I said earlier, we'll be going up. We'll be kind of walking around, just doing stuff. If you want to meet up, hey, we'll meet up. But Cal game, Fighting Irish Faithful will have a post-game show, which means Red Snapper knows that I wish to reference an airplane reference, with the gondola or whatever whatever that I don't know, like Amazon-ish drum thing is. But anyway, that's bad radio. The from the movie Airplane. We will be at the Marshall game, but we will be tailgating at the Cal game. So anyone who wishes to see us, Brandon, I know we've met. You came to our quote-unquote tailgate at the Blue and Gold game. And people like Brandon Yeager, Dave, and a few other people, Kev, Craig. We had good times. So if anyone wishes to meet up with us, we were not going to be in the Joy slot. We're going to be in I think the North lot, the library lot. I don't know. They've built like 5 buildings since then, since I was a grad student in 2010. So we'll just roll with it. It's all good. Well, Brandon, we are stacked on people tonight. We've got a ton of people. Anything else you want to say?
Nope. I will definitely message you on Saturday and hopefully be able to meet up either before or after the game. And definitely, hopefully it's a good game and we're all in high spirits after the game.
Well, this may narrow it down. I'll be wearing a navy blue shirt with Fighting Irish Faithful logo on the shirt. So if you're not aware,
I'll be looking for that.
The Fighting Irish Faithful show has an Etsy store. So if you love this show, or you just have money to burn and you just want to buy fun shirts, or if you have a room that needs painting in your house and you need a shirt, you can buy the Fighting Irish Faithful shirt.
I'll have to check out that store.
All right. Oh, Brandon's got some painting. It sounds like he's going to redo his bathroom. All right. Thanks, Brandon, for jumping on.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Go Irish. Let's jump to Coach Barsegian, our almost uninterrupted co-host, Coach Barsegian. You've been invited to speak, if you so wish.
How's everything going?
Coach Barsegian, respect and honor to you, worthy coach.
How's everything going, guys?
Doing good, Coach. How are you?
Man, I'm great. Week's almost halfway over, so.
Is it really? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Man, that much closer to game day. Woohoo!
You gotta love those beginning of the week holidays.
Well, Coach, we've kind of got a trifecta of topics tonight between Marshall, reflections of Ohio State, and the LSU game, just because we want to bash Brian Kelly. Where would you like to take us?
Well, my biggest concern I had for the LSU Florida State game is still what happened to Brian Kelly's Southern accent. It completely disappeared.
It's amazing. What happened?
I'm still scratching my head over that.
How did that happen?
But he's only played one game, so, I mean, he can't get any worse, right? I mean, he's the one that said that. So.
Well, I think at halftime he kind of ate his own words, like we can't play any worse, right? So.
Oh, God. It was the most Brian Kelly thing to ever happen at the end of that game.
You know, this makes me feel better about myself because, like, the people whoever at LSU was responsible for making that decision to hire him, first off, thank you. You know, I would like to send you a free Fighting Irish Faithful t-shirt for taking Brian Kelly off of our hands, okay? And now the university doesn't have to pay him anymore. We can actually pay a coach worth of crap to develop our players and not mind fuck them with checks and reads and all this other bullshit. Right? Okay, sorry, I'm getting angry. My point is, why the hell did LSU hire Brian Kelly? I don't know the answer to that. Yes, he has a decent winning record, but look, he did not win anything worth a shit at Notre Dame. That's it.
I can completely understand why any other program, because in theory, when he leaves a program, the program is in better shape than when he got there.
That is true.
In theory. But they don't win anything. They don't win anything that matters. There's no major hardware in the trophy case.
Yep.
By the time he's gone. I mean, Cincinnati had a couple of conference championships and a few BCS bowl game appearances. The only school that had won anything was Grand Valley.
Yeah.
And that was a couple of D2 national titles. Big deal for that. It's Division
Right.
2.
Yeah.
So, but
But-
still, it's just so great. I got lambasted on Twitter for posting how Notre Dame is in a better position with Marcus Freeman. Some troll LSU fan was posting screenshots of tweets of me bashing Tommy Rees and the way the offense played Saturday, and it's just like, okay, why don't you wait and see what happens Sunday before you start really running your mouth? And of course, nothing is said after that.
Yeah, and I saw a rumor that, LSU, and forgive me, I don't know the gentleman's name, but it's one of the receivers for LSU, looked very unsatisfied during the game, and he's entering the transfer portal. That's the rumor. And it's like...
Yeah, wasn't it the guy that muffed the 2 punts?
I don't know if it was a punt return, but it's one of their receivers. He looks very talented. It looks like he's just not satisfied with what's happening, and maybe that's one of the problems with college football nowadays. And I don't want to get into that tonight. But my point is, this is a guy who's at LSU. He wanted to be part of a winning program. He probably committed back around the time of Joe Burrow and Ogeron and all these, successful events happening at LSU. Maybe he's from the South. I don't know. The point is, this guy, now he's got BK there. He sees what's happening. He's like, wait a minute, fuck that. What did this guy do at Notre Dame? Who's this guy? He's not even on the headset. He's not talking to us. Is he really coaching? I don't know. I just see politicians, but, politicians coach speech. Gosh, say that 10 times fast. This is the kind of stuff that's happening down at LSU, and this player is wanting to transfer. I don't know.
Oh, in answer to your question earlier about Norfolk State's mascot, I believe they're the Spartans.
They're the Spartans, yes.
Good.
Congratulations, Coach Parsegian. Ding, ding, ding. Winner.
It was either the Spartans or the Trojans, one of the two.
Definitely not the Trojans. Well, Coach Parsegian, with respect to the Marshall game, moving forward with Notre Dame and our program in this season, Notre Dame is favored by 20 points. Is there any risk that Notre Dame does not cover the 20-point spread?
The only way they don't cover the spread is if, and I'm not even going to blame so much the offensive line, is if the play calling is as conservative as it was Saturday. If Notre Dame doesn't jump on them with a quickness, and by jump on them, I mean like Georgia Tech last year, jump on them, get up 20, 30 points before halftime, it could probably be a neck-and-neck game. Just based off of how Marshall played last week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Marshall scored 7 touchdowns last week, right? They had 4 rushing touchdowns, right? Their third down defense is right now currently, if you look at CFP stats, is second in the entire country at 8.3. So, granted, they played a weaker team with weaker talent, and it's kind of a lower level game, but the numbers they put up, 612 yards. Go out and run 612 yards tomorrow. You will be gassed, right? Marshall did that against Norfolk State. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. This is a team that had the physical tools to do that. I'm not saying that Notre Dame should be concerned about this. All I'm saying, and then I'll throw it to Red Snapper, all I'm saying is Notre Dame, and I don't think Marcus Freeman will do this just because it's at home and it's his first home game and all this other, pomp and circumstance, which I will be participating in on Saturday. Fine. My point is, we should not wipe our nose with Marshall, quote unquote, just because they're Marshall. We need to pay attention, be focused, locked in on the game plan, and beat the shit out of them by 3-4 touchdowns, right?
No, great. And I think Marshall's dangerous because they have the ability
To run the football.
ride game. Well, they get to ride the emotion, the motivation, the feeling of accomplishment in their first game with their stats they put up, with the production and execution they had. And the game plan, they executed it.
4 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, and a fuck ton of points. 55 points. 55 points! If we could only be so lucky.
Motivation per game. You know that they're gonna have but win the
Red Snapper, you're just like, I don't know, you're like in outer space here. You need to get to a secret space where the Wi-Fi is better. Coach Varsigian, should we be worried about Marshall?
I'm honestly going to say no. I'm going to say no just because it's Marshall. I mean, it's Marshall. They don't play anybody unless it's the other team's homecoming.
Yep.
It's Marshall. Now, that doesn't mean Notre Dame couldn't slip up. We've seen it before, especially under Brian Kelly. But I just get this gut feeling based off of Saturday that Marcus Freeman has a very Lou Holtz-esque way of motivating the team to show up. So, and just based off of everything we've heard since he was hired, this team loves to play for him. So,
excellent.
I feel like they're going to be ready, especially being at home. I would not be concerned about Marshall at all.
Excellent. Well, Coach, thanks for joining us. We're going to jump to our next person, unless there's anything else you want to jump to. At Coach Parsegian on the Twitter. Very, very loyal supporter of the show. Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys.
We're going to jump to Kevin at Kevin Davis. Kevin, our X's and O's guys, especially on the defensive side, at Davis0560. Kevin, hope you can join us tonight. If you can, if not, no big deal. One thing I wanted to jump out, since we're talking about Brian Kelly, is I put out there on Twitter at faithful_Irish. I put a poll out there regarding LSU and the Florida State game, but also I wanted to understand from the Twitterati on Twitter, which game was more crazy? The LSU game, Florida State game, or the Appalachia State game, UNC game? And surprisingly, and I've done multiple polls on Twitter, but this one got by far the most response. And I got ties on them. Now, I don't know what the rest of our fans think, but if anyone wants to join, Kevin, who do you think was a more crazy game? The Florida State game versus LSU or the Appalachia State North Carolina game? Kevin, go ahead, and I've invited you to speak. Go ahead and jump on.
Can you guys hear me?
There you are. Hi, Kevin.
Oh, I missed out on a number or whatever you guys saying. I don't know, it cut out or something on me.
That's all right. It's the internet. We'll just roll with it.
I want to go, if I can start backwards a little bit, start with Marshall. I don't think we have a darn thing to worry about with Marshall because, they're riding on a high of their win, but we're riding on a high of a loss. And there's nothing like a team who feel like they were that close to winning the game and lost it, going into another game against a team that's not as talented. So I feel Marshall was in for a world of hurt. think it's going to be pretty bad.
Kevin, I agree with you 100% in the sense that Marshall should be concerned because there's probably a lot of players on Notre Dame's team that are pissed with this loss, that came in very hungry, very energetic, wishing to, dominate in the horseshoe, and it didn't happen, which we'll talk about soon. And you've kind of teed me up here, but I do agree that Notre Dame's players should be hungry to basically chew up on Marshall, a lower level team that's been scheduled. Between Marshall and UNLV, both teams should be absolutely decimated, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that troubles me, and this is kind of analysis I did because, and I'm gonna go on my soapbox here real quick. I went back and looked at this Ohio State game last couple of days, and I wanted to know. Okay, look, Notre Dame was up for a good part of this game. We were up at halftime. We were up 10-7 going into the third quarter. And I wanted to understand better how Notre Dame was doing. I mean, let's face it. Ohio State scored 2 touchdowns back-to-back in 2 drives towards the end of the game in their third-to-last and second-to-last drive. But prior to that, there were 4 drives from both teams that yielded 0 points. And what I wanted to look at is, okay, how successful was Notre Dame in their overall yards and their overall offensive production? Now, I'm kind of cherry picking the offense here, but I wanted to know how much yards Notre Dame had put up by their playmakers up to and at the point in which we scored our touchdown. Our last points on the scoreboard. So, if you recall, our first drive was unsuccessful. Then we kicked a field goal. Oh, excuse me. I take that back. I'm sorry. Our first drive was a field goal. Then 2 drives back-to-back, nothing. Then our 4th drive was our touchdown by Estime. Okay, here's the deal. Styles, Estime, Diggs, Buckner, Mayer, Tyree, Salerno, and Bauman all contributed in yards for Notre Dame leading up to that last touchdown, our only touchdown of the entire game. Up to that point, Styles had 1 pass for 54 yards. Estime had multiple touches for only 18 yards. Mayer, in the 4 catches he had, 15 yards. Salerno, 1 catch, 31 yards. Bauman, 1 catch, 22 yards. What if I was to say that in less than 1/3 of the entire clock time of the entire game, Notre Dame had only produced 60% of our entire yards of the entire game? Not even a third of the game, not even 20 minutes of the game has gone by, and Notre Dame has already yielded 60% of our entire yard production of the entire game against Ohio State. That's not good. Furthermore, Salerno, Bauman, Styles, Estime, these guys had contributed a bulk of their overall yard productivity to Notre Dame's offense. Styles, 1 catch, 54 yards, the first fucking play of our entire offense, okay? And we already talked about that earlier in the show. 1 play, Buckner, eats shit, takes a penalty, good on Buckner. Styles, 54 yards, shows his speed and some of his jiggy joysticks moves, 54 yards. That's his only production on the play sheet for the entire year. Estime, 86% of his total yards was at that point in the game. Mayer, look, the guy had 4 touches for 15 yards. That was 47% of his entire production for the entire game, and nothing else came of that. No touchdowns, no nothing else, right? Salerno, 1 catch, 31 yards. Bauman, 1 catch, 22 yards. The team as a whole, produced 253 yards. At that point, 152 yards. Where am I going with this? My concern right now is that Notre Dame produced 60% of its entire yards in that time. And unfortunately, Ohio State, with good coaching and good players, was able to shut our offense down. Not even halfway through the second quarter. This is something that should be of concern to us as Notre Dame fans. And when you look at a team like Marshall, it kind of freaks you out because Marshall is like well above the national champion average. Grant, they played a shitty opponent. Okay. But Marshall had the ability with a halfway decent coach. You know, he's not trash, right? Okay, they went 7-6 last year, right? But it was his first year ever coaching, right? And he's coaching Marshall, right? A team with, 86 ranking recruiting, right? Marshall was able to go into their opponent. Yes, it was Norfolk State, but they produced a shit ton of yards. Why do I bring all this up? Notre Dame was humbled in this game, and either it means a couple of things. Either we stalled out and sputtered and we looked like crap, which I don't think is the case, or one other team, i.e. Ohio State, was able to adapt better than Notre Dame. I honestly don't know the answer to this, but I think it's worthy of mentioning that most of our productive playmakers, Styles, Estime, Mayer, Salerno, Tyree, the guy who's bringing in touchdown receptions, on kickoffs and shit from Gus Johnson on this to introduce his podcast. He only had, 34 yards in this game. Like, what the hell? And only 11 yards up to the point of this touchdown. So, Kevin, you're a coach, right? You coach defense. What do you make of all this?
So, what I noticed from that game and from what you just said is that it's time that we went to a 2 tight end set. And the reason I say this is because obviously our tight ends are better receivers. And also, with 2 tight ends, it gives you more protection on the run, which makes you more of a threat in that area. So now you have the defense on their heels because now you got to worry about a quarterback that can run, a decent running back, tight ends where they're going to be blocking or releasing. It makes the defense think that much more. I think we need to go and try to figure out how to do more of a 2 tight end set.
Yeah, I'm at the end of the game.
Go ahead, Red Snapper. I'm sorry. What was that?
I was just saying, keep preaching because that's exactly what I was saying.
Red Snapper, you sound like a robot.
I absolutely loved when they were in double tight ends, the few times they did it, and that power eye jumbo package at the goal line. That to me said a lot, but when they were running a Tampa 2 deep, they literally were just saying, okay, throw in the middle, and we weren't even lining anyone up. By putting Bauman and Mayer in the middle, lined up at the end of the line, that forces the safeties to have to play a little bit more rather than cheating outside like they were.
Yeah, one of the things that this show talks about is running the football, and the reason for that is national champions on average run the ball more than they pass the ball. Yeah, passing is sexy, it's fun, it's kind of the way things are going, but still 56% of the time national champions are running the ball 56% of the time, right? So do we want to just do our own thing because we like it? No. We want to do the things that are effective, the things that work. So that's one of the reasons why we are hashtag RTDB, which I know Kevin now knows what that is. And it was so exciting to see Estime in an I formation jump over the pile. do that in the game for our only touchdown, and that's not why we scored. We were on the 1 yard line, right? I get it, right? So, all right, Kevin, is there anything else you want us to talk about after I went on my soapbox about our lack of productivity after our first touchdown? Because quite frankly, it was pretty shitty. After not even a third of the game had been expired. 18 minutes of the 60 minutes of football had expired, and already 60% of our offensive production had been spent.
Yeah, I personally think that I know everybody talking about the line. I think I know Patterson's day to day per Freeman, but I think just if anybody played O line before, there's a cohesiveness there that if you're missing a piece,
Yep.
and you're lacking that cohesiveness, then you get what you got at Ohio State. But I think when he comes back, I think we'll see that cohesiveness locked back in, and I think they'll show something a lot different than what we saw against Ohio State. And I also want to say I will debate anybody in the world on that defensive play where we blitz our safeties. If anybody has a problem with Golden blitzing those safeties, I would debate them 100 times over again because that was the absolute right call. It was just poorly executed by both safeties and that corner. They just played. The safeties didn't come hard, and the corner gave up the inside. That's the one place where you blitz two safeties, you can't give up. It was just poorly played.
Which play are you referring to? I'm sorry.
The touchdown where we blitz both safeties.
Oh, okay. That in the fourth quarter.
I thought it was for the time in the game. It was an unexpected call that I think would have worked perfectly if the safeties would have came hard and that corner to go inside. That's the one place you cannot get beat on that type of stunt. He allowed himself to get beat inside on that stunt, and that caused a touchdown. But I don't think the call was bad at all for that time in the game. A lot of people think it was a shitty call. I don't think so. I think it was gutsy, and I think it was a good call. It was just poorly executed.
I mean, my opinion is down in distance, and I don't know specifically, and I'd have to go back and watch the film. But, I mean, look, I'm not a defensive coach, and Kevin, you are way more experienced on some of these things than I am. But my whole opinion of the whole game is like, look, I never believe that the outcome of any football game or any sporting match, period, comes down to one play. There's very, very few exceptions. Maybe Florida State 2014, a bullshit pass interference call. Okay, we'll talk about that. My point is this play that Kevin's talking about. Look, I don't think that maybe one misassignment or one extra or ordinary performance by Ohio State to rise above a blitz or whatnot to be successful. Look, they've got good players. They have good players, and you expect good players to be successful when faced with adversity. Notre Dame put themselves in a position where they were not successful because of repeated events. They did not produce on offense on the remaining possessions that they had, right? They had 6 possessions after their only touchdown, one touchdown the entire game, where they were not successful. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to jump to someone else here. We've got some new people here. We've got Tim. We've got JB at pronounced Jayb on Twitter, or at Doman Golder. If you wish to join the Fighting Irish Faithful show, by all means, please accept the invitation to speak. If not, and you just want to listen and be an active listener of the Fighting Irish Faithful show, by all means. One other thing we wanted to talk about tonight is Notre Dame's productivity in this game. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Honestly, look, Notre Dame scored 2 touchdowns in its first 4 possessions, but the remaining, as we said, were not successful. And the piece I want to talk about is the starting field position. Now, this isn't... I don't want to put a whole lot of stock into this, but it's something that makes you kind of go, huh? And if Notre Dame is talking about winning, what is football all about? It's all about field position. It's all about gamesmanship. It's all about where you are on 100 yards versus your opponent. Notre Dame averaged starting field position on the 18-yard line. 18-yard line behind the 20 in our own red zone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 possessions. Notre Dame on average was in our red zone that entire time. Ohio State, not the case. Averaged on the 23-yard line for Ohio State. Now, 5 yards isn't a whole lot. 18 versus 23 yards. Okay, but hey, one's in the red zone, one's not. And is that a function of punting? No, I don't want to start kicking our poor punter, down the alley here. No, that's not what I'm talking about. The point I'm making is, why was Notre Dame not successful? Notre Dame was a contributing reason, was not successful because we started within our own 15-yard line 5 fucking times. Our second possession, we started on the 5. Our fourth possession, ironically, the one we scored our touchdown on, we started on the 13th. The fifth possession, we started on the 5th. And then far from that, I think our 8th possession, we started on the 12th. Notre Dame had really, really bad field position. The only time we had halfway decent field position was at the beginning of the third quarter. We started on the 44-yard line, our own 44. But we went 6 plays and only went 20 yards, and then we ended up punting, and we threw incomplete passes. This is the kind of stuff that's going to drive the Notre Dame fan base crazy. This is the kind of stuff that is what throws gasoline on the fire when people are criticizing Tommy Rees. Look, a lot needs to happen between now and later in the season for us to really be statistically, analytically critical of Tommy Rees. I think people's response to Tommy Rees, I'm not here to defend him or criticize him. My point here is you're the offensive coordinator. Your job is to move the fucking football and score points. And that did not happen. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Your job is to call plays, move the ball down the field. Don't give me this bullshit about people being injured, people being, you're playing at Ohio State, they have better talent, we have a new quarterback. Those are all excuses. Tommy Rees has been around for a long time. He was a quarterback at Notre Dame. He's unfortunately not developed a quarterback at Notre Dame. This is his opportunity to redeem himself under the, poisoning influence of BK, which we've talked about. My point is that Tommy Rees needs to do better. You have bad field position. You need to make it happen. We've invited Dave to throw down the Thunder tonight? It says you're connecting, Dave. Dave, you get to a special place in the factory. Stop
Especially
checking.
as Dave got a soft spot for special teams.
I know, doesn't he? Stop checking drive shafts with, Honda or Toyota or Chevy or whoever you work for. Oh, he dropped off. Sad day. Sad. All right. Well, we invited Dave. Dave's been a loyal supporter of the show to bring the Thunder. But Kevin, I see you there. Kevin, what's your response to this analytics?
Does Reese have to do better? I mean, I know he's taking a lot of heat, right? With the movement of the ball in our field position.
I mean, it's been one game, right? We should be fair to him, right?
Yeah, but it's like, as a coach, I'm going to have to defend the coach and just say, there's only so much we can do, right? We're not on the field. We don't run the plays. We don't block. If the receivers aren't running routes hard, if the old line is giving up holes for defenses to run through, if, there's certain things that we can help. Could his play decisions been better? Of course. I mean, I think any coach that go into a game, win or lose, will say, I could have did such and such better. I feel like it's an all-around, that loss is an all-around loss on the offense in all aspects. All coaches, all players that played offense, it's all their fault. It's not just Reese's. I feel like everybody needs to carry some weight of that.
I
loss.
agree. And one thing, and I charted some of the plays here. The drive we scored a touchdown. It was our longest drive by far. We had 10 plays and we drove the ball 87 yards, ultimately with that estimate jump over the pile touchdown. The following drives go as this: 5 plays, 3 plays, 6 plays, 6 plays, 5 plays, 3 plays, end of game. And the problem I have is look, offense and especially a running offense, offense needs a drive, if that makes sense. Like you need to have momentum to have a significant drive to score touchdowns, right? Again, another reason why I'm a huge proponent of running the football, because you get into this momentum. It's like a snowball effect, right? You're going downhill. There's nothing you can do to stop it, right? Which is really funny, because at the end of the game, you have this dichotomy of, the 2-minute drill, and a successful 2-minute drill kind of feels like the same way, but you only throw 4 or 5 plays, and all of a sudden, boom, you're on the 10-yard line ready to score, right? So, but if you're not in that, jump under the door, because the world's about to blow up, Indiana Jones, MacGyver type of situation, you end up having, again, another reason why running the football is a sustainable model. You have the clock that keeps rolling. You have, let's face it. Kevin, you're a coach. I want you to jump on here on this. What do offensive linemen love more than anything else, Kevin? What do offensive linemen love to do?
Putting defensive linemen on their back, moving the ball.
Yeah. And how do they like doing that? Running the football. Absolutely. Offensive linemen love running the football. They love just pounding into that guy or the guy they're double teaming. It doesn't matter. They love running the football. They love creating a hole, it doesn't matter if the running back, fullback gets 3 yards, 4 yards, or 20 yards. It doesn't matter. They love running the football, right? That's the kind of stuff that keeps those guys hungry, keeps them going, keeps them churning, keeps them going.
It's hard to get a pancake block on pass blocking.
Oh yeah, you can't do that. That's all about I'm just gonna stand here and be a shield for this man here to throw a football. That's different from just driving forward and putting someone's face into the fucking dirt. Excuse my French, but that's literally what happens with run blocking. Pass blocking is a little different. It's more of patty cake. Oh, go away. And that's not to be, disrespectful to pass blocking, but there's a totally different, mantra between running blocking and pass blocking, right? And I wasn't even an offensive lineman. Granted, the offense that my high school ran, we did a lot of running, and our primary play was a running off, a running play that I had to block for. So I understood that, right? And I didn't care if we got 3 yards or 20 yards, right? That's the point. Like, you're successful running the football. And in my position as a Z receiver, our base formation, I would actually get the ball and get it on a counter or a toss or something and run the ball. And I didn't care if I got positive yardage. Man, I was high-fiving our tackles and our guards. That's the kind of shit that makes you excited and makes that offense roll. When you're running passes and you're not being productive and you're running into a wall and the guys up front are not getting a push, and this is not a criticism of our offensive lineman coach, but my point is, if Notre Dame cannot get a push on Saturday, this Saturday against Marshall, we've got some serious flipping problems for the rest of the season. Do I think that's going to happen? Do I think that's going to be an issue? No, I don't. I think we have much more talent. Yes, Marshall put up a, silly amount of stats. If you go and look at the numbers like we talked about earlier in the show, yes, Marshall put up a lot of numbers, a lot of stats, a lot of great things that, if we were unbiased and impartial, we didn't look at the strength of schedule and we thought Norfolk State was just as good as any SEC team. They're not. But look, Marshall put up crazy amounts of numbers. 600 yards of offense. We should pay attention to that. We should not take them for granted, but we should focus on our abilities, where we're going with things, and where we need to be. We need to play Notre Dame football, 60 minutes of Notre Dame football, and be ready to take it to the Thundering Herd. Well, we're getting to the end of my notes. We've criticized Brian Kelly enough. We've kind of scared people straight about Marshall, how potentially they have the potential for putting up big numbers, but should we pay attention? Probably not. But hey, anything can happen on Saturday. Sometimes Appalachia State beats Michigan, right? It's Michigan, they're a pile of shit program. But hey, you never know.
One quick note on Brian Kelly, real quick. I know we don't talk about him, but just real quick. Keyshawn Bout is a guy who was supposed to be entering the transfer portal along with that guy who did the fumbles, but Keyshawn Bout, he's a All-American projected top 10 pick. That's why that's such a big deal.
I agree. So, I think, and let me back the bus up a little bit on that, and I'll get back to Kevin, what Kevin's trying to say. So I went to Notre Dame. I didn't go there for undergrad. I went there for my master's. I feel very blessed to have a degree from the University of Notre Dame. And I love our football team, and clearly I do a podcast about the football team. But I also hold my degree and what is printed on that sheet of sheep skin. Say that 10 times fast. It is literally printed on sheepskin. That's why it's in a safe with some humidity controlled stuff. But anyway, I have a degree from that university. I want our football team to be successful. But as a Notre Dame fan, and I think this goes into some of the other avenues that bring people into the Notre Dame family. Maybe your grandma was Irish. Maybe you're Catholic. Maybe you're really smart. Maybe you grew up in the Fort Wayne, South Bend Diocese. Who knows? You're from Chicago. used to watch them on TV. Your grandpa used to watch them. You know, there's many avenues that bring anybody into Notre Dame. There's very few reasons where someone wakes up and says, oh, I'm going to be a Notre Dame fan. Because if they look at the who's won a national championship in the last 20 years, you will not see Notre Dame. So that was not a reason for people to be a Notre Dame fan. Usually people become a Notre Dame fan because of something called excellence. You believe that Notre Dame stands for something more than just winning national championships, because quite frankly, that hasn't happened in a few years. We would all love that. That's what this podcast tries to promote and suggest how we could potentially get there. But as an alum of Notre Dame, I feel like it's my duty to say, look, we need people to be part of the Notre Dame family. And not that it's some exclusive thing. That's not what I'm saying. But Notre Dame is not just football. It's huge. It's more about the love of the community. There are Subway alums, people who have never even stepped foot on campus that consider themselves part of this university. That's fantastic. We love those people. We love everyone that aligns themselves with Notre Dame. People who are students, people who want to be successful, people who care about the mission of the university. And I'm not trying to get preachy here, but Notre Dame is more than just football. Notre Dame, I think, is something that in this era of conference realignment, super conferences, playoff expansion, you know, USC, UCLA abandoning the Pac-12 and going to the Big Ten, we need Notre Dame to be a solid rock of independence going into the future. We need someone that stands for something of principle, something we can support, something where Newt Rockne means something. Notre Dame, to me, I want every player, transfer, freshman, walk-on, Rudy, I don't care. I want people to be successful with their life. Get your degree, be part of the Notre Dame network, the Notre Dame family. That means something. I want you to be successful off the football field, in addition to our football team. We do a football podcast. I want our team to be national championship. And so if we can get this guy, this young man from LSU, who woke up a few days ago and realized, oh shit, Brian Kelly is one giant, farce and is totally full of garbage and is not going to make me successful in either my professional football career or my career after college, whatever. I don't know the details of this young man. My point is, this young guy, if Notre Dame has the ability and the academic requirements, the university, talks about a lot of these things, and I'm totally fine with that. Because if the university abandoned that, I think a lot of us would question our fandom, like, quite frankly. We want Notre Dame to be, not to be arrogant, but kind of a city on the hill. We want to have the high academics. We want to have the high ideals. We don't want to necessarily pay players even in the era of NIL, right? Like, I think maybe we need to in order to stay competitive at the top echelon of college football, right? But I've already come out and say how we could do that. Pay players, in a trust account. The longer you stay in, the more money you make. Sell jerseys in the bookstore, and a percentage of your jersey sales, goes to your account. Shit like that. There are smart people, way more smarter than me, with Notre Dame that can figure out this financial part for these guys. If someone wants to transfer to Notre Dame, I don't want it to just be for football. That's the point I'm making to Kevin. I'll throw it back to Kevin here. The point I want to make is, if this young man from LSU realizes that LSU is not going to get it done for him, and throw it back to Kevin here. Kevin, does this guy have the ability to maybe be welcomed into the Notre Dame family?
I wasn't mentioning it for him to come to Notre Dame. I don't think I don't know if he's academically prepared for what Notre Dame has to offer.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt,
So
no doubt.
yeah, so I didn't see him in that way. I was just stating it as a fact that it will be a huge loss for Kelly, as far as not just the team currently, but as far as recruiting. If you lose a projected top 10 draft pick because of you as a coach, I think recruiting would tank for them also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but he's not coming to Notre Dame. I don't see that.
Yeah,
happening.
I think. I mean, hey, I know nothing of this individual. I know nothing of what he studied, what his major is. None of that stuff at LSU. Is there a possibility? Sure, there's always a possibility, but I would like to believe that Notre Dame has some requirements, some standards per se that may or may, there's a litmus test, right? And it look, we saw this in 2014, right? There was a huge quote unquote scandal about players cheating and a TA, what have you, and people like Kavari Russell and Isaac Rochelle were basically not allowed to participate in any football activities the entire season. And the university took its time, and quite frankly, I was okay with that. Because my degree means something to me, and not that, my employer is going to question anything. But my point is, I'd like to think that Notre Dame means more than just football. Look, we do a football podcast, but it is still a college. There is a academic degree that these individuals on the playing field should be pursuing. Yes, why are they there? They're there to play football. Let's not kid ourselves. I've come on here many times and said, look, they're there to play football. They make millions of dollars for the university every weekend. I'm never going to question that, right? So, well, we've invited Dave to speak at Chicago Cubbies 4. Dave, do you realize this Notre Dame football season? I don't know. I don't know if Dave is here. Well, if Dave's not going to jump on, we're getting to the end of the show here. Oh.
There I am. I'm on. My mic was off.
What the heck, Dave?
All right. Okay. I've been listening. I agree with a lot of stuff you guys have said. I've coached high school football. I coached it for 15 years. Won a couple state championships here in Ohio. The way we went about that 3rd down and 6 at the 15-yard line late in the 3rd quarter, we're still ahead. Now, don't like the call at all. You have a true freshman out there, left him out on an island. If you're gonna run a blitz off one of your corners, off the edge in the slot, replace him with a safety, and go from there. Not try to bring guys 20 yards deep and not get home. They didn't even get close to getting home. They were about 8-9 yards from the line of scrimmage when the ball was snapped.
Are you referring to our defense in the second half?
In the second half, that call because we're still ahead at this point. Should we honestly be ahead at this point? No, but we were. Okay, but don't run a double safety blitz when you got a true freshman in there and leave him out on an island. And he bought on one little juke move and then the kid ran the post and it was a touchdown, game over. Momentum over. There was nothing. We hardly had any momentum in the second half to begin with. Period. It was OSU all over again, except it was Oklahoma State, not Ohio State.
Yeah. Well, Dave, and for everyone who's joining us, who's this guy that we've led on? So this is Dave. Dave is a loyal contributor to the Fighting Irish Faithful show. Dave is passionate. I'll just put it that way.
But I'm passionate because I know the game, and watching things that happen. Sometimes I understand it, sometimes I don't. But I didn't understand when we got a lead, even though we have honestly, how we had the lead is beyond me, but we did. And if we come away with letting
Dave, if I may jump in, I'll be very honest with everybody here. I was very surprised that we were up at half over Ohio State, and this is probably the most cocky I've ever been on Twitter, basically telling Ohio State people like, oh, I bet you weren't expecting Notre Dame to be up at halftime, 10-7, because that's what it was. And that's not to rub, anyone's nose into the into the carpet here. But my point is, like, look, and I do not want to make 2012 comparisons, but like, look, if this shit continues for the next 3, 4, 5 games where we're, eking out wins and we're up by a touchdown or less at halftime, well, shit, the 2012 comparisons are going to come out left and right. Do I want that to happen? No. Do I think that's a sustainable model? No, because national champions over the last 10 years certainly haven't done that, and that's always the standard we're going to compare this show to. But my point is, look, Notre Dame was up at half. We were winning at this point.
Yeah.
And it took Ohio State a long, long freaking time to take the lead. Look, between their first touchdown when they initially took the lead to where they finished, they went 6 drives in a row and produced nothing. Exactly. No points.
Yeah.
And then they had 2 back-to-back touchdowns, and then they ended up, taking a knee at the end. But up until that last bit, there were 4 drives that Notre Dame had that produced nothing, and it's like, look, and Dave, I'll throw it back to you here. Notre Dame in those 4 drives between the estimate jumper the pile, make my RTDB, juices flowing here. After that, man, dude, 4 drives, 5 drives in a row, you don't get it done. That's not good.
And in those 4 or 5 drives you're talking about, I got 10 fingers, but I don't need 10 fingers to tell me how many times we ran the ball in those 4 possessions.
Yeah.
I mean, we totally gave up on the run game, whether we're outside zone or inside zone, pounding it in the middle. To me, I'm like, what are you doing? Run the ball.
Well, and with respect to, if I may jump in, Dave, we did run the ball 62% of the time during the entire game, which is far, far and above what the national champion average is. And so I do give praise to Reese and Coach Freeman for sticking to the run, waiting for one of those runs to break out. My problem is, and we talked about this early in the show, is, and this is not to be critical of Harry Heastan and the offensive line, but look, Tyler Bruckner did not have the time to find an open receiver. We've gone back on this show and said that the second most important stat is passing touchdowns. There's nothing more important than total touchdowns. There's nothing after that more important than passing touchdowns. And as much as I hate to say that, I don't like to say that because I love running the football, but the numbers over the last 10 years tell me that the national champion, their stats, they throw the football a decent amount of the time. They average 8.5 in the country ranking in throwing passing touchdowns. They throw 41 fucking touchdowns for the whole fucking season. Excuse my French, but I'm not French. We threw 0. Dave, we threw 0. And you know how many attempts we had? Yeah. We had 18 attempts and we only had 10 flipping receptions from our freaking from our receivers. And 5 of them were for one guy who had less than 100 yards receiving, and that's Mike Mayer. He had 5 receptions for the entire game. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. Damn it.
Bro, I agree with you. And the 62% of the runs were in the first half because we'd hardly ran it in the second. Barely ran it in the second. Barely ran it in the second. We gave up on it in the third quarter. I don't think we ran. You may look this stat up. I don't think you ran the football in the fourth quarter at all. With the couple possessions that we had.
I stopped charting the plays after our first touchdown because I knew after that is not going to end well, and there was not enough Isla single malt Scotch whiskey from Costco to support the analysis. So, and we had to do a show tonight.
You're talking about our line coach. Well, you know what? It's not real hard to slide a guy over in a gap that's left open for a linebacker to come running in when you already got the other guys on the end of the line already taken care of. And instead, they're double teaming a guy and leaves the linebacker free will to Buckner and just knock him on his ass.
Yep.
I mean, that's football 101. I mean, especially when it comes to offensive linemen.
I mean, there is a reason why Buckner is the toast of the night. Buckner, I think for what he had in that game, and this is not to be negative to our offensive line,
right? No, he was good.
Well,
we didn't fumble. We didn't throw a pick.
No one had a pick. No one had a fumble.
Nobody.
That's not true. Mayer technically fumbled the ball.
Yeah, but that's, that's here and over there because he got it back. So I'm just talking. Buckner handled the ball, didn't turn it over. Like you said, I mean, that front compared to the front that I seen last year with Ohio State was like night and day.
Yeah.
I mean, that front last year wasn't getting home like it did against us. It's either that or we haven't been coached up well enough on the offensive line, and they better get their heads out of their asses because you have to show up every Saturday. If you do not show up, you will get beat like we almost did against Toledo last year, my alma mater. They almost beat us last year.
Yes, they did. Well, and if anyone's, savvy with the show or anyone's a loyal,
every Saturday.
Red Snapper, the first live show I ever did, quote unquote, in studio. Red Snapper can, jump in on this. That was the Toledo show. Red Snapper was in the studio. We were sharing the mic. We weren't as high-tech and advanced as we are now with double mics, even though I just have 2 mics to myself. If I did it now, which is weird. But Red Snapper and I talked about that. I went on a rant in the Toledo game that, look, it's Toledo. Our talent, our skills, our resources are far above and away of what Toledo has. And there's no reason why in the fourth quarter we should be in a fucking dogfight against the Rockets. There's no reason for it. And that's what happened last year. And if anyone is looking at the numbers, looking at the data, that's what we do on this show. Everyone else, every other show, hold on a second. Every other podcast you listen to, you've got some smart people, you've got some intelligent people, you've got some witty people, smart people. I don't want to be critical or negative to any other show, and furthermore, we love supporting other people. 5 Foot Nothing Pod, I'm wearing the jersey that I bought, quote unquote, from him. Look, we love other shows. No other show is more analytical than this one. No one else looks at data and numbers like we do. Why do we do that? We do that because we give a shit, and not that these people don't, but we give a shit because we like, look, evidence drives the results. Evidence drives the performance on the field. And if we're scoring 40 plus passing touchdowns a year, we'll be okay. If we don't throw a single passing touchdown all game, hey, red flag, man. Red flag.
Unless we're scoring a shit ton of touchdowns on the ground, we don't have to pass.
Yeah,
That's
that
fine,
didn't happen.
but we didn't, and that didn't happen.
That did not happen.
So where do we
panic
go?
and freak out! Panic and freak out! Ah! Okay.
I mean, do we go to Reese and our offensive line coach, or is it the play calling? I mean, it's like I heard somebody talking about, well, it's Marcus Freeman's job to find out and figure out whose ass he needs to chew on his coaching staff after a game like that. And I'm thinking, well, there's two guys. Really, I mean, Reese and and even Al Golden for that, to me, that dumbass double blitz of two safeties on 3rd and 6 at the 15. That call honestly turned the whole game completely around, because when they scored, the stadium erupted like nobody's business, like it did after their first touchdown, because after that, you couldn't hear a damn pin drop in that stadium. And I've been in that stadium a million damn times, and that place was silent until that touchdown.
I was
and then
really,
that was all she wrote.
I was really surprised as how deflated. And this is a credit to Marcus Freeman, to Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish faithful in the stadium, people like Brandon, people who went to the game, who have season tickets, who have access to that kind of stuff, or, you know, just are way more committed, or don't have a 14 month, year old baby. Dave, I'm glad you got that. By the way, he's walking.
That's a little one. Is he?
He's walking, by the way. Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh. How fun's that? Yeah.
Nothing is safe, including me. Okay. For the baby Irish faithful is 14 months old. So, that stadium in Columbus, I've never heard as quiet as I heard on Saturday. I was like, holy shit, this is a horseshoe. Like, I'm hearing Notre Dame people. Notre Dame's up. People are shitting their pants. Ohio State people. Twitter was a little quiet, for the Ohio State Twitterati, and that's not to be negative to Ohio State people. And of all teams in the Midwest that I respect, there's no other team I respect more than Ohio State, just because of what they've done in recent years, And it's like, but some of their people on Twitter are just complete a-holes, and it's like, well, they just wait till they win, and then they're like, ha, 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 ha. And it's like, well, hold the phone.
That's true.
Where were you in the third quarter? And not that really matters, because you ended up winning the game, but that's my point. So, well, Dave, what are your last reflections? We're over 2 hours in tonight. This has kind of been a Ohio State reflection show. Dave's driving home from work, inspecting drive shafts. We really have a game against Marshall coming up. Dave, what's your opinion versus Marshall?
Like I said, we better show up. They've been a good, decent team. I can't remember the last time they've had a losing season. I'd have to look that up. But I think it's been a while. So they got winning tradition down there at Marshall. I think ever since one of the greatest wide receivers of all time left there.
Yep.
That should have been playing for Notre Dame, but was with Notre Dame, and then wasn't with Notre Dame. And then he went to Florida State, and then he went to Marshall.
Yeah, that's and for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about Dave. Who is that?
Randall Moss.
Randy Moss.
Not only could he was a three-sport star. I mean, basketball, track. I mean, he won the 100, 200 meters in West Virginia. Walked off the track, didn't even go get his medals. I mean, he was just a freak. I mean, really?
Yeah.
And it could have been playing for us.
Yeah. I think that's
Rick Meyer at quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really indicative of the environment at the time and kind of the transition of college football and where Notre Dame was and kind of this transition. I think that if things were different today with the support structure that Notre Dame has for their players, from anything from tutoring to other, academic support and whatnot, to just the ability to be, there are more resources at Notre Dame than there were ever before. And I think if Randy Moss was potentially, today a recruit and wanted to commit to Notre Dame, I think that Notre Dame would have had the resources to figure it out. I think at the time that maybe it was a little premature. And again, I do not represent the university. I do not know the details of Randy Moss's situation. Maybe there were some deals that were like, Notre Dame was like, oh, hell no, no way. I don't know. But what I will say is that I believe there's a 30 for 30 that has come out on this situation as well.
They had a 30 for 30 with him because his teammate came here. And I'm trying to remember his name. And you guys want to jump in? His teammate played for Notre Dame for 4 years. He came, and Randy, of course, But we're talking about the academics. Okay, our last national championship had a quarterback that had a 2.2 grade average down in South Carolina, and he made it to Notre Dame. Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, if Tony Rice can get into Notre Dame, then Randy Moss should have been able to get into Notre Dame as well.
Yeah,
But then again, Randy liked smoking pot and everything else, which that was his business. And he did that. I mean, 30 for 30 was, it was pretty evident they did a lot of it.
Yeah, that is probably one of the 34 30s I will watch. I don't usually watch ESPN. I watch games. I did resurrect, quote unquote, my Netflix subscription to watch the Manti Te'o podcast, whatever, which was fantastic. It was fantastic. Oh my gosh, that was well done. And
the media owes Manti Te'o the biggest apology in history of
mankind. The media is the media, and I don't. I agree with you, Dave, 100%. I just don't think that they have the integrity to do something like that, right? And we don't have to get into the whole bit there, but they live and die based off of what's hot and quote unquote fresh in the news, and that was a huge story at the time, and especially and it hurt so much more as a Notre Dame fan, the Notre Dame family, for someone that we knew was just such a genuine, loving, wonderful human being, and to just see that kind of distraction happen. And what was interesting about that whole documentary about Manti Te'o on Netflix was kind of hearing his story and what he was going through, and that was nice to hear as a Notre Dame fan, and I had already dealt with the whole thing, but it did bring more closure, quote unquote, to the whole situation, because it's like, well, okay, now we got to hear from Manti Te'o more so than we already have. We got to hear from this other individual who had kind of instigated the whole situation, and we don't have to get into the whole thing. You know, everyone else can subscribe to Netflix, but this is one of those things where I had closed Netflix a couple months before because, you know, hey, we weren't really watching it. You know, it would save some money. You know, I got a baby, got to save for college or whatever, and it's like, you know, hey, you know, let's resurrect this sucker for a month and watch this thing because, you know, I'm, as a Notre Dame fan, you know, this is important to me, and I want to hear Manti Te'o's side of the story, and that's all it comes down to.
And it was hard for him at times, which is, you know, and how national TV that's going to be all around the world. This is going to be around. The whole world's going to see this.
Yep.
And to do what he did, you know, I commend him. You know, I mean, he was as gullible, and not only that, he was as talented a linebacker that's ever played at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
well,
he's the best linebacker that ever put on a uniform at Notre Dame.
Yeah, well, if Bo Bauer does not, you know, instigate the sharp hockey skate package, no, that's for anyone who's followed the show, we've given a lot of praise to Bo Bauer, but you know, Maris Liafau is looking up like a force to be reckoned with. You know, he's looking good.
Yeah, he didn't do anything after the first series in that game on Saturday.
You know what? But he had more productivity and more stats and more tackles than someone like J.D. Bertrand. So, I will say that.
I agree. Now I got a question. Did any of you guys know if Prince Collie got any snaps?
I don't know if he got more snaps, but he did not show up on the play sheet as far as
I don't
capturing a tackle. So
which is beyond. We went to that spring game and we saw him. We talked about him, and if he didn't get any plays in there, there's something wrong because he was all over the place in that spring game too, running and making plays. And he didn't. If he didn't get any snaps Saturday, then that's a travesty.
Well, my hope, Dave, is that against an opponent like Marshall, a team with significantly less talent than the Fighting Irish, that he will take the field, dominate, end up on the stat sheet, end up on the play card, and cement his name in Notre Dame history. Dave, I really appreciate you jumping on late. It is late. It is late at night. Dave, it's like your night's just beginning because you work second shift.
Now you guys are going. You're going to go to the game on Saturday.
Yeah. So for anyone who's just jumping on or missed that earlier, so Fighting Irish faithful, I personally will be at the Marshall game. Now I'm kind of hosting some people who have never been to campus before, some people from Knights of Columbus, what have you. We're just kind of not tailgating, but just kind of seeing campus. So I will be on campus. So hit me up on Twitter. If it's convenient and you're nearby, we'll do a Marco Polo and, outside the Dome or the Basilica, whatever. But I will be at the Marshall game, and then followed from that, Fighting Irish faithful will have a tailgate at the Cal game. We will come back next week to talk about this, which also means for 2 weeks in a row, y'all will not get a post-game show. I'm so sorry, but you know what? Look, I got to drive home that night. We will not do post-game shows for the Marshall game. We will not do post-game shows for the Cal game, but we will do our normal Tuesday night show, 9 p.m., 9:30, whatever suits our fancy. By the time we finish the sound check, Fighting Irish faithful will be back on the air 9 o'clock next week. This time, same bat time, same bat channel, but no post-game show. So we will be at the Cal game and the Marshall game, respectively. So.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Dave, thank you for joining me tonight. It's been a great show with everyone. Really happy to dissect and do a little bit more Brian Kelly bashing. Why not? And then we were able to talk more and more about the Ohio State game, anything from where our offense was breaking down, give some praise to Tyler Buckner, and then also analyze Marshall. We should not overlook Marshall. But what we should do is recognize that Marshall does have some weapons, does have the ability to, they're not a shitty coach team, but they're an okay coach team. And Notre Dame should jump down the line here and beat them. Thank you everyone for joining us on the Fighting Irish Faithful show. This is Volume 60, Season 3, Episode 8. I am at Fighting Irish Faithful, at Faithful_Irish. My brother, my co-host, who's been a little quiet tonight, at Red Snapper 9098, but he's wearing a suit. He's all fancy and well pressed and well dressed. Thank you everyone for joining us, from Kev to Brandon to Dave to ND Fanatics, everyone in between. We are so happy you've all joined us tonight. And Notre Dame hopefully will pick themselves up off the mat after the loss to Ohio State. Go Irish, beat the Thundering Herd.